week. We had a great question come in today from our SpyTribe. And the question was, what was your first job? Like literally, what was your first job?
My first job was the drive-through cashier to Taco Bell.
Was that your first job?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. You tell me stories about that all the time.
Yeah. So when I was 15, I wanted to work because I wanted to be independent, make my own money and all that. And nobody would hire me because I didn't have any experience. I was always so mad. CVS was actually the first place I tried to get a job. There was a CVS drugstore right by my house, walking distance. And I was like, I can learn how to work your cash register. I can definitely stock your shelves. I can do something here. And they were like, no, like you don't have any experience. So I ended up with a Taco Bell job because my cousin worked at a different Taco Bell and he was friends with the manager and I networked into Taco Bell. But it was a fantastic job. Like I loved it. I loved working. I loved the pace. It was at the time when Taco Bell had this, like, if we don't get you your food in under 2 minutes, it's free or whatever. So I loved like this fast pace of like getting the food out the door. And like,
So when you tell me stories about that place, you always tell me about the people you worked with. And that sounded like a bit of a rowdy crowd.
Yes, it was. Yeah. I had my first love worked at the same Taco Bell. He had actually been my second grade boyfriend who I'd lost touch with. And then when I started working at the Taco Bell, he was there. Wow. And I was madly in love with him. And so we dated that whole time, my senior year of high school. And then the other
romance in the Taco Bell.
Romance in the Taco
Bell. I bet it's not that rare, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah, and there was, a lot of the people there were high school age. And we would hang out after work, and it was great.
Wow, that begs for a taco burrito joke. I'm just saying.
Oh, so funny enough, I was a vegetarian at the time. So, yeah. The only thing I could eat was like their rice bowl. And then the guy in the back used to custom make it for me. It was great.
Wow.
Good times when you're like 16.
So my first job was actually also in food services. Mm-hmm. I was a dishwasher. I was a dishwasher at a country club restaurant.
That sounds nice.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't bad. And it's funny because I also got networked into that role. And I started when I was 15. So I was actually too young to work according to Pennsylvania state law.
Oh, interesting.
So somebody who was a friend of a friend of my dad, I'm pretty sure the way the story goes. And again, like I don't have a lot of very fond memories of my dad. So this could be who knows what.
Yeah.
I feel like my dad wanted me out of the house and he was like, you got to find a job. And I was like, I'm too young to work. Because it's actually illegal for a 15-year-old to work. And he said something about how that was baloney and it wasn't like that when he was a kid. And then he called up somebody or talked to somebody and they were like, sure, we can hire him under the table.
In the back
as a dishwasher at the country club.
Awesome.
And it wasn't like a fancy country club. It was like a rural Pennsylvania country club.
Yeah.
So it was a place that actually had the word shack in the name. Right? Like it was a shack, burger shack, golf shack, whatever else. So that was my actual first job. And what was interesting is I really enjoyed working there for a lot of the same reasons that you mentioned, because you're doing something, like you're being productive, you're working with a team, you're important enough to actually be needed at a certain time. That's something that never happened in my house.
Yeah.
And people said thank you. And I got a paycheck. And it wasn't very much, but it was more than what I was getting paid at home to do the dishes.
Yeah.
Right? But I also hated the job because it was so incredibly boring. But I learned, this is so interesting. I learned in that job that there's always more to do. And I started learning how to accept that there will always be more to do. Because you know what it's like when you work in a dishwashing capacity for a restaurant?
Always more dishes.
There's always more dishes.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how fast you clean them. It doesn't matter how nice they are. It doesn't matter what your equipment is. The faster you get it out, more will be coming in.
Yeah.
Right? So you really do learn to live according to the clock.
Yeah.
So it's like, my shift is over at 5. There will be more dishes tomorrow.
Yeah.
I don't need to try to finish off the pile, because if I finish off the pile, someone's going to bring 1 more dish in or 2 more dishes in.
Yeah.
And we struggle with the same concept in our business life all the time. Probably a topic for a different day.
Yeah. And then did you tell me that that job had a hand in getting you into the Air Force Academy?
Yeah. So the owner of that country club restaurant, the owner of that restaurant became a big fan of mine. And I don't know why. I don't know if it was my work ethic or whatever, right? Yeah. But he became a big fan of mine. He ended up co-owning a much nicer restaurant in a different part, but in the same like city, just a different part of the city. So then when I became of legal age to work, he actually moved me from this dishwasher position in the shack, the golf shack, and he moved me into his restaurant as a dishwasher there. And then from there, I kept climbing up from the back, right? I went from being a dishwasher to being like a busboy, from being a busboy to being like a prep person to being a cook to being a waiter, and then that's what I did. I only really ever worked for one guy from the time I was 15 until the time I was 19.
Interesting.
Yeah. And the restaurant where I worked at with him when I was a waiter became the go-to restaurant for both of Pennsylvania's senators. And he became friends with the senators. And when he found out I was going to apply to the military academy, he would actually like pull me out of off the floor to go sit with the senator at the bar and have a conversation. So,
that's amazing. I mean, it's you never think about how, your first job can lead you down the road to where you are now, basically. I mean,
it's true.
It's incredible.
It is. And because it's my story, I never realize that it's special to other people. Yeah. Because I feel like it must be that way for everybody. But that's, I think, how we all feel about our own story. It's so common and trivial to us. We just assume it must be common and trivial to everybody.
Yeah. So no first job's a bad first job.
No first job's a bad first job. If you like this short clip, make sure you click here to see the next clip or here to see the full podcast episode.
Freedom! So fresh, so new. Freedom!